My father sold me like a secret he hoped would stay buried. The scent of lilies still makes my throat close. That day, they lined the altar. White, innocent, nothing like the man waiting at the end of the aisle. I wore lace stitched by hands I never met, in a dress I didn't choose. The veil hid my panic, but it couldn't mute the sound of my heart, a slow, frantic drum roll behind my ribs. I wasn't marrying for love. I was being handed over like currency. Luca Moretti didn't look at me when I reached him. He didn't need to. His presence was louder than any vow. Black suit, black eyes, a silence that made everyone smaller. Even the priest flinched when he spoke. "I do," he said like a verdict, cold, final. I should have screamed. But my voice, it died somewhere inside me last winter when my mother did. The ring was heavy, his hand heavier, his fingers wrapped around mine like a man laying claim. And when he finally looked at me, I saw nothing, no warmth, number. Curiosity. Just calculation. He hated me, and I would learn to hate him too. Stand still. His voice was low, without tone, but it vibrated through me like thunder far off. He adjusted the diamond at my throat, the one his mother had once worn. It didn't feel like jewelry. It felt like a collar. "I'm not a dog," I said before. I could stop myself. His eyes lifted slowly, a smirk, just a flicker. "No," he murmured. "Dogs are loyal." That should have stung. It did. But it also told me something dangerous. He expected disobedience. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to give it to him. That night, we didn't consummate the marriage. We didn't even speak. He locked the bedroom door behind him with a metallic click, not to trap me inside, to keep me out. The hallway was colder than the church. I pressed my hand to the door, half hoping it would open, half hoping it wouldn't. Why did I feel relief when he rejected me? Why did I feel shame when he didn't touch me? The next morning, I woke up to silence. But silence is never safe in a house like this. It hides the whispers, the bribes, the plans. By lunch, I knew 3 things. I was now the wife of a man who controlled half of Manhattan's underground. I had no power. And someone in this house already wanted me gone. Her name was Talia, his cousin, or his lover, or both. The way she looked at me at breakfast was carved in ice. "She won't last," she said in front of everyone. Girls, like her, cry the first time they see blood. Luca didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He didn't even blink. So that's how it's going to be, I thought, staring into my untouched tea. I'm just another piece in his game, another pawn to be moved or removed. I told myself I would play along, smile, stay quiet, stay safe. But that night I made a choice. I opened the locked drawer in my room. Inside was a phone, untraceable. I texted the only person I still trusted. "It's done. I'm in. Watch him." The reply came fast. "Be careful. He's not who you think." I stared at the screen, my heart a tight fist. Neither am I. Some men raise their voices when they're angry. Luca, he disappears into silence so deep, it becomes a room you can't escape. The morning after the wedding, the bed beside me was still untouched. He hadn't slept here. Or maybe he had and made sure I'd never know. The velvet curtains muffled the light. The room smelled like expensive cologne and secrets. Somewhere in the walls, the radiator hissed like the house itself was warning. Me, I found him in the dining room, alone, sitting at the head of the long, polished table. Black shirt, no tie, no expression. He didn't look up when I entered, didn't acknowledge me. The silence stretched. Say something, anything even, if it's cruel, because this quiet, it feels like being buried alive. I took the seat furthest from him. He poured coffee into a white porcelain cup and placed it in front of me, not by walking it over, but by sliding it with deliberate force. It stopped inches from my fingers. "Drink," he said, just one word, but it landed like a command. "I don't like coffee." He raised his eyes slowly. His stare was more violent than a slap. "You'll learn, so this is how it begins." Not with blood, but with submission. Talia entered next. Red silk dress, a smirk that curved like a knife. She walked past me and kissed Luca's cheek. "Sleep well, cousin?" she asked, clearly trying to provoke something. He didn't respond. I wasn't sure who her venom was aimed at, him or me, but it didn't matter. The warning was clear. I wasn't wanted here, not by the family, and maybe not even by him. Later that day, I wandered the halls. I wasn't stupid enough to ask permission, but not brave enough to run. There were eyes everywhere. Guards, maids, who didn't speak unless spoken to. Doors that locked from the outside. I was in a palace, but it might as well have been a cage. At the end of the West Wing, I found a door slightly ajar. Inside, shelves of books, leather-bound, untouched. A study, maybe his, and a desk. Clean, almost too clean, but something was off. There, under the blotter, a corner of something, paper. I pulled it free. A torn photo. A girl, dark hair, soft eyes, my age. And though I'd never seen her before, something in her face looked familiar. I slipped the piece into my dress. I didn't know why. Just that Luca wouldn't want me to see it. That night, dinner was quiet again, except for one moment. He looked up from his plate and said, "You were in my study." Not a question, a statement. I froze. How did he know? "I was just exploring," I lied. His jaw flexed. "Don't lie to me." My pulse skittered. His voice was still low, but colder now, sharper. "You don't want to know what happens to people who lie to me." I should have cried, should have begged, but instead, I met his stare and whispered, "Then teach me how to tell the truth." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not desire, something like confusion, like I wasn't behaving the way he'd expected me to. That night, I locked the door to my bedroom, even though I knew it wouldn't stop him if he wanted in. I stared at the photo I'd stolen. On the back was something scribbled in black ink. She knew the truth, and they killed her for it. Who was she? And what truth was worth dying for in this house? I didn't sleep, and in the morning, the door to my room was wide open, but I know I locked it. Lies taste different when you're telling them to survive. Sharper, bitter, almost like blood at the back of your throat. The photo never left my nightstand. I didn't know her name, but I knew her eyes. They haunted me not just for what they held, but for what they were missing. Life, hope, escape. Whoever she was, she didn't make it out. And if I didn't move carefully, neither would I. Breakfast was quiet again. Only this time Luca was already seated when I entered. He looked at his phone, not at me, but his voice came like a blade. "You were up late." My fingers went still on the silverware. He didn't ask a question. He never asked, he stated, then watched to see if I'd flinch. I couldn't sleep. Bad dreams, yes. He finally looked at me. His gaze swept over my face like a searchlight. "You should be careful what you dream about in this house." Talia was watching from the end of the table, like a cat waiting for the mouse to slip. "She lies beautifully," she said aloud. Her voice sugar-dipped poison. I almost believe her. Luca didn't flinch, didn't defend me. But he said, without turning, "Then maybe she's more like us than I thought." Later, in the garden, I made my first mistake. There was a man, older, with sharp eyes and a limp. He worked among the roses, pruning without looking up. I stepped too close. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "I needed air." He looked at me. For the first time, his stare was different, not cruel, but knowing you're the new bride, I nodded. His eyes narrowed. "You don't know who he really is, do you?" My breath caught. "Who?" He didn't answer, just handed me a folded napkin and walked off like nothing happened. I waited until I was alone before opening it. Inside, a name, a date, and one line written in rushed, slanted ink. "Ask Luca what happened to Sophia." Sophia, the girl in the photo. Who was she? A lover, a victim, a sister? The name echoed through like a scream buried under water. I knew what I had to do, even if it was dangerous. That night, I found him alone in the study. He didn't hear me enter, or maybe he did. He just didn't care. His back was to me. The fire glowed against his black shirt. I took one breath and another. Then, who was Sophia? He didn't move, didn't speak. For a moment I thought, he hadn't heard then. She was someone who didn't listen. I stepped closer. "Did you kill her?" He turned slowly, deliberately. "No," he said, "but I should have." My heart froze. "But someone else did," he continued, "because she thought love could save her." "And what about me? What will they do to the girl who doesn't believe in love at all?" Later that night, I texted the number I hadn't used in days, the only connection I still had to the outside. "World, do you know who Sophia was?" The reply came faster than I expected. "She died for something Luca is still hiding." I stared at the screen, then typed the first real lie I'd ever told, not to him, not to them, but to the only person trying to help me. "I'm fine. Don't come for me." I hit send, then deleted the entire thread because the deeper I sank into this house, the more I understood one truth. If I wanted to survive Luca Moretti, I had to become something else. Not his wife, not his enemy, something in between. It wasn't the first time his eyes pinned me like prey, but it was the first time his mouth followed, and nothing about it felt like love. I was wearing a dress I didn't choose. Again, they had me wrapped in black silk like I was already mourning something. Maybe my innocence, a family dinner. Luca's uncle had returned from Palermo, which meant appearances had to be made. Smiles, toasts, lies. I sat beside him, Luca, the man I had married without a single kiss, until tonight. "Don't speak unless spoken to," he murmured just before we entered the room. His hand brushed my waist, not with affection, but with control. I hated that I didn't move away. Hated more that a part of me wanted him to do it again. The long table was filled with men whose eyes roamed without shame, women who knew how to sit still, and a silence thick with old debts. Luca poured me wine, red, rich, like blood still warm. "You should drink," he said under his breath. "Your nerves are showing." I held the glass, but didn't sip. He leaned closer. I said, "Drink." I looked at him, chin lifted. "No." He froze, then smiled slowly, like I'd just passed a test he wasn't sure I'd take. "You'll regret that later," he whispered. Midway through the dinner, his uncle turned to me. "So, bride," he said, his English thick, slurred with age and vodka, "you know what your husband did before the wedding." The table tensed. Luca didn't move. I didn't blink. "No," I said softly, "but I'm sure he'll tell me eventually." The uncle laughed. "You have fire. You'll need it." Talia rolled her eyes across the table. Not fire, just fear pretending to be something else. After dessert, I tried to leave the room first, but Luca caught my wrist hard. He pulled me into the hallway and pressed me against the wall. Not roughly, not gently, just completely. "You enjoyed that?" he asked. "What? The game?" "The answers. Testing how far you can go." I stared up at him. "I only want the truth," he smiled, a cold, almost tender cruelty in his expression. "No, Karamia, you want power." Then he kissed me. No warning, no build-up. His mouth found mine like a war he'd waited weeks to start. There was no softness, no apology, just control and heat. God help me, I kissed him back. But when he pulled away, his hand still gripping my wrist, he said something that dropped like a blade between us. "You'll never win this game." I am the game. Then he let me go and walked away like he hadn't just set something inside me on fire. I stood there, dazed, angry, and aching in places I didn't understand. That wasn't love. It wasn't even passion. It was a threat sealed on my lips, but still, my body hadn't said no. And that terrified me more than anything he could do. Later that night, when I returned to my room, the photo was gone. The one I'd hidden beneath my pillow. Someone had been here. Someone wanted me to know it. I wasn't just being watched anymore. I was being warned. But they had no idea what I was willing to become to survive. Not his wife, not his prisoner. Something darker. Something he couldn't control. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a ruin. And I was the perfect foundation to destroy. I didn't leave my room for 2 days. The guards didn't stop me. Luca didn't ask where I was. And no one came to bring food. They were testing me to see if I'd come crawling back into their world on my knees. But I didn't. I sat in the window seat, watching the rain trace lines across the glass. Each droplet a breath I didn't know how to take anymore. He kissed me like a warning, and I still feel it. Why does my body betray me when my heart knows better? On the third night, the door opened. No knock, just Luca, his presence like the absence of warmth. He looked around like he'd forgotten what silence felt like. "You've been hiding," he said. "I thought that was what you wanted." He didn't smile, didn't blink. Instead, he walked to my desk and dropped something onto the wood. "A folder, your father," he said, "wasn't as loyal as he claimed." I stared at the folder, didn't open it. He took a step closer. He stole from me, lied to my face, and then offered you as an apology. My throat tightened. I didn't know. He leaned down so close I felt the chill of his breath. "I don't care." So this is who I married. Not a man, a blade with a heartbeat. "You were never meant to be a wife," he said, voice like smoke. "You were meant to be leverage." I finally looked up. Then why marry me at all? He stepped back, watching me like a predator watches a cornered thing. Because the best way to control a man is through the thing he pretends not to love. My father. That night, I opened the folder. Inside, bank statements, coded letters, photos of my father shaking hands with men who should have been enemies, and one signature, his on an agreement I never saw, trading allegiance for my body. He knew what kind of man Luca was, and he sent me anyway. I walked the halls with a new kind of silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of calculation. Talia found me near the back stairwell. She looked at me like she always did, like I was breakable. "You look pale," she said. "Found out what he really is." I smiled, small and sharp. "No, I found out what I really am." She blinked for the first time. She looked unsure. I went to Luca that night. He was in the study again, drink in hand, eyes distant. I didn't knock. "You said I was leverage." I told him. He didn't turn. "Still are." I stepped closer. "Then use me." He did turn. Then slowly, measuring me, "What game are you playing now?" "No game, just truth." He stared at me so long, I thought he might throw his glass, or worse, touch me again. Instead, he said, "Truth is the sharpest weapon. Careful who you give it to." We didn't speak again that night, but when I left, I knew something had shifted. He didn't want a wife. He wanted someone who understood the blood on his hands and didn't flinch. And slowly, I was becoming that girl. He wanted to break me, but instead, he was teaching me how to break others. The first night I laid beside him, we didn't touch. The second night, he pulled me close, and by the third, I stopped asking which part of me he was really holding. There was no announcement, no permission. One night, his guards carried my things into his room. They didn't speak, didn't look at me, just left the door open behind them, and he was waiting, sitting in a chair by the fire. Black shirt, sleeves, rolled whiskey in his hand like it belonged there more than any warmth ever could. "You'll sleep here from now on," he said. "Why?" I asked. His eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. "Because I want you where I can see you." The bed was massive, cold sheets. I lay on the edge, barely breathing. Luca didn't touch me. He just turned out the light and let the darkness fall between us like a wall of glass. But his presence, it was worse than any touch. It filled every silence, every inhale. Is this what it means to be owned, to be looked at but never truly seen? In the middle of the night, I heard him shift. His voice came low, unshaken. "What did your father promise you?" I didn't answer at first. Then, freedom, after the wedding. A pause. Then, he lied. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. "So did you." He didn't deny it. The next morning, I woke to find him gone, but something was left in his place. A book on the nightstand. Inside it, a photo of her Sophia, and written beneath it, in Luca's unmistakable scrawl, "She slept in this bed too." That day, I didn't leave the room, didn't eat. I lay there, surrounded by silk and shadows, wondering what happened to the girl before me, wondering if I was next. By nightfall, he returned, silent, controlled. He stood by the window, back to me, long enough to make me forget he was even breathing. Then, she died because she tried to save someone who wasn't worth it. My voice broke the stillness. "Who?" He turned his head. "Me. And yet I'm still here, lying beside him, still letting my pulse skip when he walks too close." That night, he didn't stay in his chair. He slipped under the sheets, the mattress dipping beside me, and this time, his hand brushed my waist. Just once. Soft, testing. I didn't move. His voice came close, close enough to steal the air. "You're learning to lie well, Karamia," I whispered. "So are you." Then he did something I didn't expect. He kissed my shoulder. No threat, no heat, just quiet contact. And somehow, that terrified me more than all the silence that came before it, because it meant he saw me, and that was far more dangerous than anything else they thought I was. Soft, a bride, a pawn, but I had learned something from him, how to wear silence like a blade. The more I stayed close to Luca, the more invisible I became. Not to him, but to the others. Talia stopped speaking to me unless it was a warning wrapped in perfume. The maids passed me like a ghost. Even the guards avoided my eyes. But what they didn't see was how carefully I watched every glance, every slip, every whispered name I pretended not to hear. I smiled at them now, sweet, hollow smiles that never touched my eyes, and I could feel it working. I was no longer the frightened bride. I was something else entirely, Luca noticed. Of course he did. He never missed a shift in energy like a wolf who hears the heartbeat change before the scream. "You've grown quiet," he said over dinner one night. His voice was smooth, but his eyes were darker than usual. "Have I?" He watched me sip wine slowly. "You're hiding something." I met his gaze unflinching. "So are you." He didn't smile. Not really, but there was something like amusement. Something that told me he wasn't sure if he wanted to punish me or pull me closer. "I'm warning you," he said softly. "Don't play games you don't know how to win." I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. "Then teach me." "How?" The air changed. Sharp, electric, and still he said nothing. Because silence, I'd learned, was his most intimate language. Later that night, I found the garden door unlocked. It was never unlocked. The path was wet with evening mist, and the roses looked like open wounds in the moonlight. That's when I heard it. Two voices, near the old shed. One was Talia, the other, a man I didn't recognize. "She's not what she seems," Talia hissed. "She's too quiet now, like she's waiting. She's no threat." "She will be," Talia said, "unless we end this." I stepped backward. A branch snapped beneath my foot. Silence, then footsteps. Rushed, angry. I ran before I could think. Back through the garden, up the stairs, heart pounding against my ribs like a warning bell. By the time I reached the bedroom, I was shaking. But I smiled when I saw Luca standing at the window. "You were out," he said. I shrugged, breath still short, just some air. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. "You're lying." "Yes, I am. But I've learned how to make it sound like truth." That night, he didn't touch me. He didn't speak again, but he stayed in the bed, close, so close I could feel the heat of him and smell the leather of his jacket. And in the darkness, I whispered the first honest thing in days. "I think someone wants me dead." His breath caught. Then, after a long pause, he answered, "They won't get the chance. Some women leave behind perfume or pearls. She left behind a letter no one was supposed to find, and it had his name written in blood and warning. It was raining again, the kind of storm that made the house groan in its bones, the kind that makes secrets come loose. I was in the West Wing, a place no one mentioned and no one entered. But I'd learned that the most dangerous answers were always behind the doors that stayed locked too long. This one wasn't locked. Inside, dust, velvet, the lingering scent of something soft and fading. A bedroom. Her bedroom. Luca's mother. The mirror was covered in linen, the closet closed, but a drawer by the window had been left ajar, just slightly. I opened it. Inside was a scarf, and beneath it, an envelope sealed in red wax, the paper brittle with time. On the front, in elegant cursive, "For my son. If I don't return," I should have left it. Should have put it back and walked away, but I couldn't, because I needed to know what made him this way, and maybe this letter would tell me. I broke the seal with trembling hands and unfolded. The pages, the words were sharp, unapologetic, and terrifying in their clarity. "Luca, if you're reading this, then I was right. There are people in this family who would rather see us dead than see the truth come out. Your father's death wasn't an accident, and mine won't be either." My breath caught. "You must never trust Talia. She is not your cousin by blood. She is your father's mistake and his enemy's daughter, raised in this house too. Ruin it from the inside." I blinked hard. The words blurred, but I kept reading. "I've protected you from what I could, but you are not like them, Luca. That's what will make them want to destroy you. Don't let them, and don't lose yourself in rage. It will turn you into the man I tried to keep you from becoming. At the bottom, a single sentence. If she finds this letter, she will kill to keep you from believing it. I folded the paper slowly. My hands were shaking. Talia, she was never his blood. She was planted, a traitor dressed like kin. And Luca, he didn't know, or maybe he did, and buried it deep. I left the room in silence, slipped the letter inside a book, and tucked it under my mattress. When I returned to the main hall, he was waiting, leaning against the banister like he'd been watching every step I took. Where were you? Exploring. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp as ever. But something in me had shifted. I walked past him, didn't flinch, didn't explain. And before I reached the stairs, I turned and said softly, "Did your mother love you?" He stilled. The question hit harder than I expected. His jaw tensed, eyes darkened. "Yes," he said. Then after a pause, "But love didn't save her." That night, I lay beside him, like always. The heat of his body, the silence between us, and I knew that if I told him what I'd read, if I gave him that letter, this house would burn. But I also knew something else. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to become the only person he couldn't destroy. He touched me like I was his, but I knew better. The moment I gave him my heart, it wouldn't be in my chest anymore. The air between us had changed. It wasn't warmer, just heavier, like the space between lightning and thunder, that slow, dangerous pause, before the world splits open. Luca had barely looked at me since that night, but something in him was shifting, and whatever it was, it made my skin burn in ways I didn't know how to explain. He wasn't softening, he was circling, waiting for the right moment to close. And it happened after the charity gala. We played our roles perfectly, husband and wife, glamorous and cold. He offered his arm, I took it. He smiled for cameras, I smiled for survival. But in the car, the silence wrapped around us like smoke. His jaw was tight, his fingers gloved in leather, clenched and flexed over the wheel. Then he said it, "You belong to me." The words came like ice in a velvet glove. I didn't reply, because I knew if I did, I'd say something I couldn't take back. He didn't speak again until we reached the estate, didn't look at me until we stepped inside and the doors closed behind us. Then, in a sudden, violent motion, he pressed me against the marble wall. His hand caught my jaw, his breath against my skin. "Tell me to stop," he said, "and I will." But I didn't, not because I was weak, but because I was tired of pretending I didn't feel this wildfire when he was near. So I pulled him down to me, not with words, with hunger, and for the first time since the wedding, he kissed me like he'd forgotten who we were supposed to be. The night blurred. Clothes were nothing, words even less. There was only heat, rough hands and unspoken need. A war with no winner, only surrender. He took what I gave, but I never gave my heart, only my body, and even that felt like a gamble I couldn't afford. Hours later, I woke up before him. His arm was draped across my waist, possessive, heavy, but his face, in sleep, he looked nothing like the man who ruled with silence and threat. He looked younger, almost human, and for a moment I wanted to touch his face, to trace the scar on his jaw, to ask what gave it to him, what broke him before I ever could. But I didn't, because that wasn't what this was. This wasn't love. Not for him, and definitely not for me, was it? I slipped out of the bed and wrapped the sheet around me, found my way to the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Somewhere deep inside, something ached, not from pain, but from knowing the more he touched me, the more I disappeared, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to come back. He kissed me like I was his future, but he looked at me like I was already his regret. The morning after, everything should have been different. It wasn't. He dressed in silence, buttoned his shirt with practiced ease, his eyes distant, not cold, just unreadable. Like the night we shared had already been packed away, filed under necessary. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a robe I didn't remember putting on, watching him like a stranger. "So that's it?" I said finally. He glanced over. "You thought it meant something." "No, yes, I don't know anymore." He left without another word, and I was alone again. Except this time, the emptiness wasn't in the room. It was in me. I wandered back into the West Wing. I don't know what drew me there. Curiosity, anger, or maybe the need to feel like I still had some control. The door to his private study was unlocked. Odd, the drawers were closed except one. Inside, a pistol, sleek, black, polished, next to it. A photo, the same girl, Sophia, only this time she wasn't alone. Luca stood beside her, his hand on her waist, smiling, not the tight, practiced smirk I'd seen him wear in public, but something real, something human. I couldn't breathe. She was more than someone he lost. She was someone he loved, and that made everything else make sense. The silence, the violence, the need to stay detached from me until he couldn't. I picked up the gun. It was heavier than I expected. Cold, too cold. I turned it in my hand and found something etched in the grip. Perlay for her. I heard the footsteps before I saw him. Luca, he stepped into the doorway and froze when he saw me holding the gun. But he didn't lunge, didn't speak. He just watched me. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not for himself. For what I might do, I wasn't going to use it, I said quietly. His voice came slow, rough. But you thought about it. I met his gaze, only for a second. He stepped closer. Then you're smarter than she was. The words hit like a slap I didn't see coming. Was that what killed Sophia? Not the bullet, but the moment she let her heart forget what kind of man she loved. He reached for the gun. I let him take it. But before he turned away, I asked, "Did you love her?" His jaw tightened. "I did once, and now she's dead." He left me there with silence, and a space between us that no fire could fill. That night, I didn't lie in bed beside him. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, and I wondered if she died loving him. What would happen to me if I did the same? Every empire is built on something rotten, and the closer I got to his heart, the more I smelled the blood. Beneath the gold, the house was too quiet. That kind of quiet that only happens when everyone's pretending they didn't just bury something. I hadn't spoken to Luca in 3 days. We moved like strangers again, brushing past each other in the hall, sharing air without sharing a word. But something had changed, not between us, around us. The guards were twitchy, Talia was tense, and the staff kept whispering in corners. They thought I wouldn't notice. Someone was afraid, and I was about to find out why. I found the key inside a book. It fell loose when I opened one of Luca's volumes in the library, tucked between pages like a secret someone had tried to. Forget Brass Old, marked with the initials AM. At first it meant nothing, until I remembered the hallway near the cellar, a single locked door I'd passed a dozen times without thinking, until now the key fit. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase, steep and stone. I descended slowly, one step at a time, each breath heavier than the last. At the bottom was a room, dusty, cold, and in the center, a filing cabinet locked, but not tight enough. I forced it open with a letter opener and rifled through papers yellowed with time. At first, nothing stood out. Then I found it. A file stamped confidential internal deals. Inside, documents with Luca's name, yes, but not just his. My father's, Talia's, and another I didn't recognize until I saw the photograph attached. Amadeo Moretti, Luca's uncle, the one who always smiled too much, who watched me too long at dinner, the man who owned more of the family's assets than Luca himself. And that's when I saw it. The signature, a deal forged before my wedding, transferring control of Luca's inheritance to Amadeo. The moment Luca became legally bound to me, I dropped the file. It was a setup. The marriage wasn't just revenge. It was a trap, and Luca had no idea. I ran back to the main house, heart pounding, skin burning, because if I knew this, then someone else did too, and someone would kill to keep it buried. I found him in the atrium, alone, hands bloodied, maybe from training, maybe from something else. I didn't ask. I just walked straight to him and whispered, "They're planning to take everything from you." He didn't move, but his eyes darkened slowly. I handed him the file. "Your uncle, my father, Talia, all of them." He took it, flipped through, silent, then softly. "This was never about love, I know." He looked at me finally, and I saw it then, something breaking behind his calm. Not rage, betrayal, and maybe something worse, fear. "You were never supposed to find this," he said. I shook my head. "Maybe not, but I did." His voice lowered. "And what do you want now?" I stepped closer. "I want to help you burn it down." He stared at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. And maybe he didn't, because neither did I, not really. But I knew one thing. The girl they married off to be used is gone, and the woman standing here now is ready for war. He was built from silence and violence, but that night he cracked, and I saw the boy who once believed love wasn't a weapon. The house felt like it was holding its breath. After I gave Luca the file, after I told him the truth, he vanished for hours. Not a word, not a sound. Only the tension crawling along the walls like smoke, waiting for a match. I stayed in my room, not out of fear, out of instinct, because something told me when he came back, he wouldn't be the same. It was past midnight when he knocked, not barged in, not stormed, knocked, and that was the first sign something was wrong. I opened the door. He looked wrong. Shirt wrinkled, blood on his collar, eyes too bright, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "Come with me," he said, voice low. I didn't ask where, I just followed. He took me outside, down the back path that led to the garden shed, though shed was the wrong word. It was a stone building older than the estate itself, locked with a code. He opened it, lit the lantern, and for the first time he let me into his past. Photographs on the wall, weapons in cases, letters, receipts, burned documents barely intact. "This was my father's," he said. I turned. "He died when you were 10. He was murdered." The words dropped like glass, shattering something I didn't know was still whole. I stepped closer. His jaw clenched. My uncle Amadeo, the same man from the file, the one who now stood to own everything Luca had fought for. He poisoned him, slowly, over months, until no one questioned why a strong man faded like fog. I swallowed. "You knew this your whole life?" He nodded once. "And you still worked under him?" I waited. He turned to me then, eyes sharp, voice soft. I waited for the right time, the right weapon, the right witness, and then he said it. "You were supposed to be that witness." My heart stopped. "What?" "You were the daughter of the one man Amadeo trusted. You were meant to get close, gather proof, without knowing you were being used." He stepped toward me, but I knew from the moment I saw you. My hands trembled. So you married me to use me? No, he whispered. I married you because I couldn't risk someone else doing it first. His voice cracked, just enough to betray what he'd been holding in. I thought, if I claimed you, I could keep you safe. Silence, heavy, brutal. Then he sank to his knees in front of me, head bowed, hands clenched. A man built of scars kneeling, not to beg for forgiveness, but for something else. Don't leave, he said. Not now, not when I'm about to burn everything for you. I touched his hair, felt it soften beneath my fingers, and I realized this was the first time he'd asked for anything. No orders, no threats, just a single broken plea. I dropped to my knees with him. Then take me with you, I said. When it burns. His head lifted, eyes glassed, and for the first time, he smiled without cruelty, just pain, and something close to peace. That night, we didn't make love. We just lay in silence, two enemies who had stopped pretending, two lovers who had nowhere else left to hide. Some truths don't explode, they drip. Slow, read, and irreversible. The plan wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean, but neither were we. We had one night, one chance before Amadeo made his final move. By morning, the transfer of power would be complete. Luca would be nothing more than a memory with a bullet in his chest, unless we moved first. Unless we made the first cut. We drove in silence. Past the estate gates, past the guards who didn't meet Luca's eyes. He wasn't their boss anymore, not officially. Amadeo had already poisoned the loyalty, and Luca, he was ready to poison everything else. The meeting was set in an old winery on the coast, empty except for ghosts and secrets. Talia would be there, so would my father. And Amadeo, of course, waiting to crown himself king of a dynasty soaked in betrayal. I wore black, not out of grief, out of clarity, because I finally understood who I was. Not a bride, not a pawn, a woman with her own blood to spill. Luca stepped into the winery first. I followed, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. They all looked up. Talia, my father, Amadeo. No one moved, except Amadeo, who smiled too wide. Did you bring the girl to watch you die, Luca? His voice was smoke and rot. Luca didn't flinch. She's not here to watch. He stepped closer. She's here to testify. I pulled the file from my coat, dropped it on the table between them like a final judgment. Receipts, dates, accounts, proof of the transfer, proof of the setup, and one last thing, a copy of the original death certificate of Luca's father, forged with Amadeo's signature faint beneath the real one. Talia paled. My father cursed, and Amadeo laughed. Not softly, loud, cruel, unhinged. You think anyone will believe this? He spat. They will, Luca said. Because she's already given it to the board, to the lawyers, to the cops. Amadeo's smile faded. That was the moment the truth bled, not on paper. But in his eyes, he knew he'd lost. And he wasn't the kind of man who lost quietly. He reached for his coat, too fast, but Luca was faster. One shot, echoing, ringing, and Amadeo was on the floor, breathing, but barely. Not dead, not yet. Not yet. Luca walked over and crouched beside him. This isn't for me, he whispered. It's for him, for the father you erased. Amadeo tried to speak. Luca shook his head. Save it for hell. Talia ran. My father didn't. He just looked at me like a stranger. Then quietly, did he make you do this? I met his gaze without blinking. No, He tried to stop me. We didn't stay for the cleanup. Let the lawyers have the blood. Let the vultures circle. We drove until the city disappeared behind us, until the sea touched the edge of the earth. That night, Luca didn't speak. He just watched the waves crash below the cliff where we stood, and finally whispered, "It's over." I stepped behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist. "No," I said, "it's just beginning." Some endings aren't about walking away, they're about standing still, while the one you love chooses the fire over you. We stayed at the cliffside villa for 3 days. No phones, no threats, no blood on the floor, just silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Luca barely spoke, but when he did, it was like something new had bloomed beneath the ash of who he used to be. Soft, sharp, temporary, because deep down I knew this was never meant to last. On the 3rd morning, I woke up to the sound of the sea and the scent of espresso. He was standing at the edge of the balcony, wind in his hair, shirt half buttoned like he didn't know how to be casual and still survive it. I watched him quietly, memorizing everything, the way his fingers flexed when he was thinking, the way his silence felt like an answer. And then he said the words I knew were coming. "I booked your flight." Just like that. No drama. No goodbye. Speech, just the truth. Bleeding gently this time. I sat up. "Where to?" "Anywhere you want." I didn't move. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. Because we both already knew. Back to the city. Back to the chair he now owned, but had never wanted. Back to the blood-stained throne of the Moretti name. He had one. But victory is lonely when the war costs you the only person who ever saw the boy beneath the boss. "I can stay," I whispered. He turned, eyes darker than the sea behind him. "You shouldn't, but I want to." His voice cracked just a little. "That's why I have to let you go." He stepped closer, touched my cheek the way someone touches something they know they can't keep. "You weren't made for this. I became this for you." A pause, and then almost broken. "Don't." Because he'd rather watch me walk away than watch me lose myself in his world. Because he loved me in the one way that hurt us both. The car came. An hour later, no guards, no escort, just a driver and a suitcase packed with everything I didn't want to take. As I stepped inside, Luca leaned down, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered something I'll never repeat aloud. It was too soft, too sacred, too final. I watched him disappear in the rearview mirror. That man who once terrified me, who taught me how to bleed without fear, who held me like I was the last secret worth protecting. And maybe, someday, I'll see him again, not as the girl who was sold to him like a weapon, but as the woman who walked away with her heart still whole, even if it still beat for him.